Questions for reflection. Today, August 6th, is the feast of the transfiguration of the Lord Jesus Christ. In our first reading from the book of Daniel, we have an example of what is called apocalyptic literature in the Bible. These writings speak to us through symbols. In this passage, Daniel has a vision of the Ancient of Days. He looks into the heavens and sees the Ancient of Days and a Son of Man given eternal kingship. We heard these words, "On him was conferred rule, honor, and kingship, and all peoples, nations, and languages became his servants. His rule is an everlasting rule which will never pass away, and his kingship will never come to an end." Christians, looking back on the writings of the Hebrew Scriptures, what we call the Old Testament, see in this prophetic vision the very Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, who was transfigured on that mountain before Peter, James, and John. In our second reading, the Apostle Peter refers back to that event on the Mount of Transfiguration as he writes his second letter to all the Christian churches, as he teaches them about the second coming of the Lord Jesus, for which all Christians look and should eagerly desire. We profess it at Holy Mass every time we recite the ancient creed. Do we believe it? Peter certainly did. In fact, it became a vital part of his Christian walk, his teaching, and his living hope. This event on the mountain was meant to strengthen the faith of these three disciples. They were about to witness the events that would lead their Lord and Master along what would appear to be an ignominious path, up Golgotha's lonely hill, to be crucified, a fate reserved for common criminals. Their own faith would be shaken, tested, and tried. He loved all who were his own in this world. Yes, as so many beautiful writings in the tradition remind us, the Lord wanted to encourage them and to encourage us. However, this one who came from eternity and took upon himself the limitations of time was about to open the portal of eternity to all of us who are being recreated in him. He would reveal to Peter, James, and John the eternal now of his own glory. He was doing so much more than simply encouraging them. He was showing them who he was and who they would become in him. He was revealing to them what had already begun and giving them a vision that would forever change the way they viewed themselves, their daily lives, and their mission after he would return to the Father. In the Gospel for this Feast of the Transfiguration, we hear the account from the Gospel of St. Matthew. From the earliest centuries, the Christian Church emphasized the centrality of the Transfiguration of the Lord. Our experience of our life in the Lord and in His church is only the beginning of what is to come in the kingdom. However, our life is already a participation in that new reality. The church, in the words of the Fathers of the Second Vatican Council, is a seed and sign of the kingdom to come. Our life within the church is a participation in the eternal realities of the life to come in a new heaven and new earth that begins in the here and now. The commemoration of the transfiguration of Jesus Christ invites us to reflect on what this all can mean for us right now. On that mountain, Jesus revealed before mortal eyes the transcendent truth of who He is and who Peter, James, and John, and each one of us will become in Him. They were invited to exercise their freedom and to embrace the path that He had prepared. And so are we right now today. Every day the grace of God is given to us to transform and transfigure us in Jesus Christ. On that mountain, Jesus was grounding them in the eternal truth and opening up for the countless millions who would hear this story from their faithful witness, a glimpse of the glory that is to come, as we also choose Him in our daily lives. The Lord Jesus has shown us the way up the mountain. He has invited us into a new way of living in Him through living within the communion of the church. Living in that church, we are invited to go into the world and invite all men and women through the waters of the womb of baptism into the new communion of love, where they can begin the process of conversion and transfiguration. Born again, we are all invited to join with Peter, James, and John and cry out in our day, "It is good for us to be here." As we reflect on the transfiguration of Jesus, let's enter more deeply into the mystery it reveals. We can begin to live in the transfiguration beginning now. It is truly good for us to be here.